I thought family was supposed to be the people who had your back no matter what. The ones who showed up for you when nobody else would, the ones you could rely on even when life threw you into the darkest pit. But in my case, family turned out to be the reason I hit rock bottom, and the reason I learned the hardest lesson about loyalty and betrayal. My story doesn't start with money or inheritance, or some big fight. It starts with a simple text in the family group chat. I had been away for a year, living abroad, working, and trying to save money to come back home for a fresh start. It wasn't easy being away from everyone, but I kept in touch. I'd send photos, updates, and sometimes I'd call, but deep down, I always felt like I was the one putting in the effort to stay connected. Still, I believed that when I came back home, things would fall into place again. My parents, my siblings, everyone, I thought they'd be happy to see me. So, on the day my flight was scheduled, I sent a simple text in our family WhatsApp group: "Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up?" It wasn't much to ask, right? Just one small thing after a year of being away. I was tired, I was carrying 2 heavy suitcases, and I honestly just wanted to feel like I belonged again. I stared at the screen, waiting for the typing dots to appear, imagining someone replying with a cheerful, "Of course, we'll be there." But the first reply I got shattered me more than I expected. It was from my older brother. He wrote, "We're all busy. Take a cab." That was it. No smiley, no warmth, no "welcome back." Just 3 cold words that made my chest tighten. I waited, hoping someone else in the group would step in, maybe my mom, maybe my sister. But silence. Nobody said anything. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process it. I told myself not to take it personally, that maybe everyone was genuinely busy, maybe something had come up. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't that they couldn't pick me up. It was that they didn't want to. The day of the flight came, and I walked out of the airport dragging my bags behind me, looking around at all the happy reunions happening around me. Families hugging, kids running into their parents' arms, people holding flowers and signs. I had nobody. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling this hollow ache in my chest, before forcing myself to wave down a cab. As I sat in the back seat, staring out the window, I kept replaying that text in my mind. Take a cab. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the message behind them. That I didn't matter enough for anyone to show up. That my presence wasn't something to celebrate, just something to tolerate. And that realization cut deeper than anything. When I finally reached home, I rolled my bags up the driveway, hoping maybe, just maybe, someone would at least open the door for me. But when I knocked, my mom opened it with this distracted look, like I was just some neighbor dropping by. No hug, no "we missed you," just a casual "oh, you're here." My dad was in the living room watching TV, and he just nodded without even standing up. My sister glanced up from her phone, mumbled "hey," and went back to scrolling. I can't explain how heavy that moment felt. I had imagined this homecoming so many times in my head, the joy, the love, the warmth. Instead, it was cold, empty, and awkward, like I was an inconvenience rather than family. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just tired from the flight, that things would feel better after I rested. But that night, as I lay on my old bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the truth: I wasn't welcome here. And if that wasn't enough, things only got worse. Over the next few days, I noticed how everyone avoided me. They made plans without including me, they whispered to each other but went silent when I walked into the room, and when I tried to start conversations, they answered with short, clipped replies. I felt like a stranger in my own house. One evening, I overheard my brother talking to my mom in the kitchen. He didn't know I was standing just around the corner. His words hit me like a punch. Why did you even tell him to come back? He doesn't belong here. He should have just stayed abroad. My mom didn't argue. She just sighed and said, I know. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just neglect. It was rejection. My own family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, didn't want me around. They saw me as an outsider, maybe even a burden. I had no idea what I had done to deserve it, but the pain of knowing they felt that way about me, it was unbearable. I decided then that if they didn't want me, I wouldn't force myself into their lives. But I also knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let their coldness break me. If they thought I was weak, unwanted, and disposable, I was going to prove them wrong. I was going to rise, not just for myself, but to show them exactly what they had thrown away. And that decision, that spark of determination in the middle of my heartbreak, was the beginning of everything that followed. When she said those words, I froze for a moment, not because I believed her, but because of how casually she had destroyed what was supposed to be a happy family celebration. My husband had only been gone for 3 weeks. I was still waking up in the middle of the night reaching for him, still smelling his shirts just to remind myself he had existed, and yet here was my sister standing in her living room, balloons still hanging from the ceiling, a cake half-eaten on the table, declaring that her son was my husband's child. People around us stopped talking, children stopped laughing, and the room fell into an uncomfortable silence so thick that you could almost hear it breathing. She looked so sure of herself, holding the baby in one arm while waving the will in the other hand like she had just won a prize. I remember staring at her, watching the way her lips curled when she said it, and in that instant, I knew this wasn't a revelation made out of grief or guilt, it was a calculated move. She had waited for the exact moment when she had an audience, when emotions were still raw, and when I was supposed to be too broken to fight back. What she didn't realize was that grief doesn't make me weaker, it makes me sharper. I kept my voice calm, though my heart was pounding in my chest, and asked her if she really wanted to stand there and accuse a dead man of fathering her child. She didn't hesitate. She said she wasn't accusing anyone, she was simply revealing the truth, and since my husband had been generous enough to acknowledge it in his will, the fair thing to do was to divide the house. People gasped. My aunt whispered to my uncle that this was scandalous. A few of my cousins exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsure of whose side to take. And me? I forced a small smile, because I wasn't about to let her see me break. I glanced down at the will she was holding. It looked familiar, but something about it seemed off. My husband had been meticulous about legal matters, and he never would have kept something like this hidden from me. He was honest to a fault, sometimes brutally so, and the idea that he would secretly father a child with my sister and then quietly leave proof of it in his will didn't add up. Still, I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence makes people dig their own graves faster than anger does. She went on about how she had struggled as a single mother, how my husband had been there for her when no one else was, and how this child deserved what was rightfully his. She even pointed to the baby's features, claiming his eyes looked just like my husband's. I almost laughed out loud at that, because anyone with common sense could see the boy looked exactly like her on and off boyfriend, the man she'd been sneaking around with for years. But I bit my tongue. This wasn't the time for laughter, it was the time for patience. Family members began whispering, some staring at me with pity, others with curiosity. Was it possible? Could my sister really be telling the truth? She thrived on that doubt. I could see it in the way her shoulders straightened, in the way her chin tilted higher. She believed she had trapped me, that I would crumble under the weight of her accusation, but she underestimated me. I set my plate down on the table, adjusted my jacket, and calmly told her that if she believed every word she was saying, then we had no reason to argue in front of relatives. There were courts, DNA tests, and lawyers for that. Her smile faltered for the first time. She hadn't expected me to respond with logic. She thought I'd either scream or cry, maybe even storm out, but instead, I gave her a calm challenge she couldn't easily dismiss. She stammered that it wasn't necessary, that the will was already clear proof. I asked her whose lawyer had drawn it up. She avoided my eyes. I pressed further, asking whether she could explain why my husband, who never even filed a form without double-checking it 3 times, would suddenly leave behind a document full of vague wording and suspiciously convenient clauses. By then, a few family members had started nodding along with me, clearly realizing something about her story didn't add up. Still, she held her ground. She insisted the will was genuine, that my husband had confessed everything to her before his death, and that I was in denial because I couldn't accept the truth. My blood boiled, but I kept my face neutral. I asked her, in front of everyone, if she was willing to swear on her son's life that everything she was saying was true. For the first time that evening, she hesitated. It was only a flicker of doubt, but it was enough for people to notice. The birthday party had completely transformed into a courtroom drama, with her standing on one side clutching her baby and forged papers, and me standing on the other with nothing but my calmness and the truth. Yet deep down, I was already planning my next move. Because if she thought she could shame me into giving away half my home and my husband's legacy, she had no idea who she was really dealing with. The days following that family group chat disaster were some of the loneliest of my life. My phone barely buzzed, and when it did, it was never from family. I thought maybe, just maybe, my mother would at least call me privately to smooth things over, but she didn't. Instead, she sent a short message that said, "You should learn to handle yourself. We can't always be there for you." I stared at that text for hours, wondering how a mother could write something so cold to her own child. It was like being abandoned in plain sight. Still, I had to focus on myself. I found a small apartment close to work and moved in quietly. No one from my family offered to help, not even with a ride to carry my boxes. My coworkers noticed the strain, though. They saw the dark circles under my eyes and the way I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message that never came. One of them, James, finally asked me why I seemed so down. And for the first time, I opened up about my family. I told him everything, the group chat, the ignored message, the way I was humiliated in public by the very people who were supposed to support me. James didn't sugarcoat it. He said, "That's cruel. But maybe this is your chance to show them you don't need them to succeed." His words stuck with me. From then on, I poured all my energy into work. I picked up extra projects, volunteered to lead meetings, and stayed late to finish tasks that no one else wanted to do. Slowly, I built a reputation in the company as someone dependable, someone worth noticing. And then came the biggest opportunity, a position open for a leadership role that everyone wanted. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew this was my moment. Meanwhile, my family's group chat continued without me. They would talk about dinners, parties, and family trips, and every time I saw a notification pop up, I felt that familiar sting in my chest. I wanted to mute the chat completely, but some part of me couldn't let go, as if I needed to keep watching just to remind myself why I had to move on. The breaking point came when I saw a picture posted in the group, a family photo taken at a reunion. Everyone was there, smiling, hugging, celebrating. Everyone but me. They hadn't even told me the reunion was happening. It was like I'd been erased from my own bloodline that I didn't cry this time. Instead, something hardened inside me. I realized they didn't deserve my tears anymore. If they wanted me gone, then I would truly vanish from their lives. But I wasn't going to disappear as a failure. I would rise, succeed, and let my life become the kind of story they'd regret not being part of. When the promotion interviews came, I gave it everything I had. I prepared night after night, rehearsed answers, studied company data, and even asked James to do mock interviews with me. The day I walked into that room, I wasn't the broken, abandoned sibling anymore. I was someone who had fought through loneliness, betrayal, and rejection, and was still standing strong. And when they announced that I got the job, I felt a kind of vindication I can't even describe. For once, I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. The day I signed the paperwork for my promotion, I felt like I had finally broken free from the weight my family had buried me under. I walked into my new office, closed the door, and just stood there, staring out of the window. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about how much my family didn't want me around. I was thinking about how far I had come without them. But life has a strange way of circling back. Not long after, my phone rang, and the caller ID made my stomach twist. It was my mother. She hadn't called me in months, so why now? I answered cautiously, and her voice came through, sweet and careful, almost rehearsed. She congratulated me on my promotion. At first, I thought maybe she was finally reaching out to reconcile, but then she got to the point. My cousin, the same one who laughed at me in the group chat, was job hunting, and apparently, my company was hiring. She wanted me to put in a good word and help get him in. For a second, I almost laughed. After all those months of silence, after erasing me from the family, now they needed me. I calmly told her that I couldn't do that. He'll have to earn it the same way I did, on his own. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, and then she snapped, saying I was being selfish, that family should always help family. That was the moment I finally let go of the guilt I had carried for so long. I told her, family should also stand by you when you're down. You all made it clear I didn't matter, so don't come to me now that I'm standing tall. And with that, I ended the call. From then on, everything changed. I stopped watching the family group chat. I stopped waiting for texts or calls that would never come. Instead, I built a new circle around me, a family of choice. James and a few other coworkers became my support system, the people I could laugh with, cry with, and celebrate with. And slowly, the emptiness that had consumed me started to heal. But the real moment of poetic justice came months later. At a company event, I overheard someone say my cousin had applied for a position but didn't even get an interview. He wasn't qualified, and my refusal to vouch for him sealed it. I didn't smile out of malice, I smiled out of relief. For once, I wasn't the one left out. For once, I was the one in control of my own story. I realized then that revenge doesn't always have to be loud or destructive. Sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding in silence while those who hurt you watch from the sidelines. My family tried to erase me, but instead, I erased the power they had over me. And when I look in the mirror now, I don't see the abandoned child anymore. I see someone who was forced to stand alone, and came out stronger than they ever imagined.